Dan Coffey, thanks for joining us, mayoral candidate.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We were talking about the weather. As we film this, we're now into the consecutive days of above freezing.
Yes.
You've been in Anchorage for many, many decades. Have you ever seen a time like this where
Sure.
the weather's just going crazy?
Yeah. I remember a December when I was in high school, and it was 44 degrees for a 3 days in December. It was Christmas break, and of course, we're all out and about over the break and not in school. And then it got cold again and froze, and it was just glare ice everywhere.
Right.
Brutal.
Yeah. Why are you running for mayor?
Well, Anchorage has been home for all my life, except for outside for education, of course. And it's been really, really a wonderful place to live. And for my mother and dad before me, you know, they got here after the Second World War. It was a small little town. Railroad and military was it. And I had a great upbringing, and this town's been real good to me. I've raised my family here. And I've been in and out of public life, 30 plus years, you know, boards and commissions or charitable organizations, that kind of stuff. And this is sort of the opportunity to do the last, sort of the last hurrah. I have no ambitions beyond mayor. And when I looked at this back in 13 and was really thinking about it, what I saw was issues for which I believe I'm uniquely qualified to address. Housing, Title 21, the development center, things that we really have to address. And then you talk about chronic public inebriates, and you talk about crime. And I've got a wealth of experience and knowledge based on my previous experiences in the Assembly and Planning and Zoning Commission. So I thought, well, you know, you really have some good ideas about how I might do this stuff. So I thought, well, let's give her a whirl. And I've served in elective office before, so I'm no stranger to it.
You talked about housing, rental rates as well as house prices to buy. They continue to go up
Yes.
every year, and some are now getting priced out of the market. As mayor, what kind of swing can you have? Yeah. Like, what would you like to see happen into the future so that we can have more affordable housing?
Well, it's not just some, it's many that are being excluded from the market, both in the purchasing and in the renting realm. It just elevates. And we haven't built a lot of housing, or very much housing, in Anchorage in quite a number of years. And the problem is, in the Bowl area in particular, is lack of buildable land. We had some 6,700 acres of it in 1998, the last Anchorage land study. We don't have that anymore. It's virtually all developed. So what's the source of land in the first place? Well, the Heritage Land Bank of Anchorage has a lot of land. Some of it is wet along Campbell Creek and the east side of town. Some of it is perfectly suitable. That has got to be put into the private sector with zoning requirements and limitations so that it is used for the development of housing. Secondly, we're going to have to get our entitlement from the state under the Statehood Act, and they owe us many, many acres. Now, they don't have the acreage, but they've got some. It's 22,000 acres that we're due, and they don't have that in the city of Anchorage. But there's several parcels. I've identified most of the larger ones, and so we're going to try to get that from the state. And finally, the federal government is probably still the biggest landowner in the city, and I'm not talking about the military bases. I'm talking about a lot of BLM tracts out on Elmore Road. And I don't know why that would be maintained in the hands of the BLM when we have such a housing need. So you get housing, and then you've got to address the regulatory scheme, which is basically the land use in Title 21 and Title 23. And then finally, you're going to have to deal with what I'm going to call it the development center. It's referred to now as the permit center. I'm one of those guys who doesn't believe you need permission from the government to build on your land or develop your land. You got to follow the rules in code, but you don't need to get permission. In fact, what we need out there is an attitude that says, how can we help you build that house, build that apartment, build that commercial property? So I'm going to emphasize all three of those in the land area. And work, finally, I've met with Klutna Inc. and SERI, which is another Native Corporation regional. And there's the North Anchorage Land Agreement, and there's other things which we can use collectively to acquire land, not that the city needs the land, but that it become land that's available for private sector development.
Let's move on to economics now, and the situation that the state is facing with the budget.
Yes.
Do you think that Anchorage will be affected by this?
Can't help it.
Mm-hmm. And so what can be done then if you know Anchorage is going to be hurting as well? Yeah. Have you thought about ways to stop that? Your
word is hurting. we are uniquely positioned because we have a tax base to weather the storm better than many, many other towns and villages and communities in Anchorage. So, two things are going to happen for sure. Number one, the revenue sharing will decrease. In 2014, last year's budget, it was about $15 million. It's anticipated to be 8 to 10 this year, and we won't know till the legislature's done. It may be 0 this year. My expectation is they'll cut it, and it'll soon be gone. $471 million municipal operating budget, $15 million gone. You can do the math. It's not huge, but it's not insignificant. So we're going to have to address that aspect. The other thing that we're going to see, if there's no funding in rural Alaska, we will see a greater and greater influx of people coming into Anchorage, Fairbanks, and if you're in Southeast, Juneau, and probably a little to Ketchikan and Sitka. But Anchorage will have the largest influx of people from rural Alaska that I think we've ever seen, because there's nothing out there, and then there won't be any money out there. So rural revenue sharing.
How would you prepare that? How would you prepare the city for that?
Well, this land issue plays into it. If the city has land, then and in large quantities, which we have some, and we're going to get a lot more, I hope, and work for it. But when we do that, then we can drive the costs of all kinds of housing down. That's one tool. The other tool is, and you got to provide housing for folks, and I don't mean free. I just mean you got to make it available. And so, if you can drive the cost of the land down, you've affected one of the biggest costs, of course, of housing. The second thing is that our social service agencies are going to be really stressed because of this influx from all over. And most of them will be, it's not, I'm worried about the chronic inebriates coming in. Sure, there'll be some, but mostly it'll be decent folks who have no other where to go.
They're looking for work.
Looking for work.
They're coming to
They're
Anchorage.
younger. They're young men and women who, they've been out in the villages, and the lifestyle out there and the support that the state has given them have sustained those places. That's going away. I believe it's going away. It has to with a $3.5 billion deficit. Something's got to give.
Yes.
And the city will take its hits, but I believe rural Alaska will suffer a lot. And then we'll have impacts here, good, bad, and otherwise, from that consequence.
Would you consider diversifying the tax base to kind of make up for the shortfall that you're predicting?
Well, I'm not interested in any new taxes. Let's start with that. We've tried that over the years, and it's always failed, a sales tax. I would rather look at ways of more efficiency, more streamlining of government, taking services that are less essential and just saying we just can't do those things anymore. Before I try to reach into the homeowners' pockets or the commercial businesses and reach into their pocket and extract more money for government. Government should be a service provider of essential services and a facilitator of the things that grow the community so that the tax base grows. That, for me, is a far better answer than let's tax this guy and let's tax that guy. And we always pick out some industry or business or something that we don't particularly like. I mean, the tobacco tax is 5 times the price of a pack of cigarettes. And I voted for it. I acknowledge that because it's such a dangerous health hazard. But the point being, we can't solve the problem with that. That's a little incremental here and there. So why don't we look at what we're doing and try to do it a little better, a lot better, actually. And I've spent a lot of time learning how that might be done as well.
Tell me about your connections within Anchorage and the business community and your support for small business, for example. Is that something that's going to be important for you?
Absolutely. That's where our employment comes from. The big companies, BP and Exxon and those boys, they don't need any help from me. They manage just fine without anything from me. You get a guy who's got a retail business and, he's worried about, he's got to go out and make sure that the tourists come. He's got to make sure that, or whatever, or that the inventory tax that he or she has to pay is not so confiscatory, or the inspections of his boiler, and just a whole host of government. I don't want to call them intrusions because a lot of it is safety stuff, but there's government involvement with local business and small local businesses that drives the costs up for these people. And it's $100 here and $300 there and so on. And those are marginal businesses and they employ 2 or 3 people. Let's be cognizant of that, and let's not increase that kind of burden on people, particularly when we have tough times.
Are you proposing to make some changes then to some of those overhead costs that small businesses are facing? That you believe aren't necessary?
I would not say maybe not necessary. We just can't afford them. Perhaps they're less essential. Now the state is going to do a whole bunch of that stuff without any help from me. The municipality will probably be forced to pick up some of that, and then the municipality will probably have to look at what it is doing and say, well, you know, we've only got $100 and we got $150 worth of work to do. What are we going to do? Are we going to take 25 of that from something else and do it, or are we going to reduce it? And those are incremental, small, relatively small decisions, but on the margins is what I'm saying. So you can't effectuate cost savings if you don't look at them that way across the board.
You have spoken out about public safety in the past, and we've had a conversation about the current status of the Anchorage Police Department and what they're facing with higher crime rate that appears to be happening this year. Have you seen that increase in crime, particularly shootings? Is it a concern to you?
Of course. If you have the number of murders we've had and the shootings we've had, of course it's a cause for concern. But it's sort of funny, in 1996, I believe it was, they've done this over 20, 30 years of measuring they take 8 crimes and they, you know, robbery, murder, so on, and they categorize them, and then they say, here's the crime rate. And it was double in 1996 than what it is today, when we had 200,000 people in town. Now we got 300, and it's a lower crime rates. But there's a consequence of what happened in 08 and 09 with our costs of our police and fire forces. The consequence was we had no revenue for additional officers. Now that's changed. We've had to do a lot of things. We had to make deals in 09 that resulted in incentives to retire in 13 and 14 to officers. We didn't have any money in 09 after those contracts were signed. You know what happened in 09, the Great Recession, they call it, right? Well, that hit us too. And there was no fund balances left in the budget and a whole host of other things. Now, we've recovered from that, and what you see now is there's an Academy of Police Officers now. It's ongoing. There's an academy in May. When I'm mayor, there's going to be 2 more academies with the goal to getting to 400 officers. 400 officers is the level at which we need to do community policing, which is the kind of policing that works. Now, the police contract is nearly done, I understand. And if that has the cost containment that we saw, that I'm understanding is coming, then we will be able to afford that kind of thing. And again, on the margins, maybe we say we can't do this and this because it's more important to have 400 officers on the street. Community policing works. Talk
to me about that, about community policing. I understand that in Fairbanks, the chief of police there has started implementing the specific on-the-ground community policing, police officers going into people's houses, invited, invited by the members of the community and forming relationships. Is that something that you would like to see more of then? It's absolutely essential. It's the only way in which we can get a handle on it. The plan is basically involve a sergeant and 6 patrolmen and districting. And it's a plan at the 5,000-foot level right now. It talks about the conceptual things, but it doesn't get down into, okay, here's District 1 or 6 or whatever. But it talks about districting, and you can see what it would be. It would be in communities. And you might put 2 sergeants and 8 men in an area of high crime, whereas you could get away with 1 sergeant and 4 men in another district. So, what's the goal then?
The goal is to just do what you just mentioned in Fairbanks. Get into the neighborhoods, work in the neighborhoods, and do the things you need to do in the neighborhoods so you know the people and the neighborhoods and what problems the people see and so on, and address them. I was talking to a former city prosecutor yesterday, and she made a recommendation that she wasn't able to do when she was in charge, to put police officers, to put we do criminal prosecution in the city, to put the prosecutors in the locations with the officers, particularly in high crime places where you're dealing with a lot of misdemeanor crime, not major felonies. That's, murder and armed robbery and those things. That's a different category. But you get, penny ante drug dealers, theft, vandalism, those sorts of things. And people in the neighborhoods, they know who it is. And you develop relationships so that you can deal with them. And it's challenging, and but it's the only way that I know of that can work. So increase the force, embed them in the neighborhoods, maybe bring the city prosecutors into the high crime areas, see what we can do.
Are there any other visions that for Anchorage, if you were elected as mayor, that you would like to take the city forward towards?
Absolutely.
Do you want to tell me
Sure.
one or two?
No, I want you to guess. No, I will tell you. I've been here throughout this sort of before unification and after. In that time frame, the street population has grown significantly, and it's a combination of behavioral health issues, mental health issues, schizophrenia, all kinds of stuff. And it's also a function of chronic public inebriates. And then there's the predators who prey on these people. And I would like to be able to address that problem in ways that work. For example, I was at Covenant Church last night, and they were talking about detox centers for a couple hours. And that's one component, detox. There's also housing. There's also training. It's
connected, and if you don't have one of them, then it kind of falls apart.
That's
if you don't have the rehabilitation after the detox, which is what we're seeing, then people just fall off the rails again.
Well, that's right.
So
I talked afterwards to a doctor and a nurse who experienced this stuff. They're medical professionals, so I sought them out. There was probably 100 people at the church talking about this, but I wanted to ask some specific questions about detox and how it fits in the continuum. And so I did, and I've learned another piece of information about it. And number one, we need more detox. But if we have more detox and we don't have places for people to live, then they're going to go wherever they go, back on the street or somewhere, and then back into it. And so the detox.
So is that more funding? I mean, it's money that's needed.
Well, I talked about a lot of city land. If you keep the cost, if you own it, and you don't have to buy it or acquire it, but you can use it, and instead of paying $20, $50, $100 a square foot or whatever the marginal price is, then you have a huge cost savings. Now, so we have some valuable land we can use that for in the municipality. Now, doing that is going to afford us the opportunity to do this other thing. They passed a liquor tax in 12 years ago. I forget what year it was. That was the highest in the country. And they made commitments to the people in the liquor industry and to the communities that of the money they raised,
they being the state,
of Alaska, being the legislators who passed that legislation, and there were a lot of them, and the industry said, okay, if you return the money like you're promising, we're not going to fight you on this tax. And it passed. And we haven't seen a nickel except what's been filtered through state agencies. Now, I'm sorry, but the city of Anchorage knows better what its needs are than somebody in a department in the state of Alaska in Juneau. Plus, they rake off a big chunk to pay themselves for the cost of doing whatever program it is they do. And after 12 years, I don't think we've seen any results from that. Now, there's $40 million annually that's raised. Half of it's 20. We're 60%. Anchorage is. That's $12 million. I can do a lot with $12 million, and I'm going after that as hard as I can. And I'm going to be a pain in the butt. And I'm serious. This is real stuff, folks. You suck the money out of one of our business organizations, you know, the restaurants and the bars and the distributors and all of those people. You take it right out of our town, and then you fiddle with it, and you give back a little bit of it. I want it all, and I want it right here, plain and simple.
Dan Coffey, I have one more question
Yes,
that I'm
ma'am.
asking all candidates. Have you considered who you would hire as the city manager, which is a very important position within our city? They have a lot of power. Is that something that you've given thought to that you'd want to share? Would you share it?
No.
Okay.
It's too early, and it's also presumptuous. But I've looked at how I'd like to organize. I've looked at the people, and I have thoughts. It's not just you or him or her. It's, well, this white man here, you know, so on. Just thinking about it and asking people, are they interested in coming to work for an administration who can't pay you a lot of money? We can't. You know, most of our execs make less than the people they supervise, and they've got more responsibility. Police and fire is an awful example. I mean, where the employees make far more than the guys in charge. And so, but that's the way it is. So I got to appeal to people's public service bone and see what we can do.
Dan Coffey, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.